Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and Ramadan Kareem. And I really am thankful for you being here on a Saturday. It's your weekend, so thank you again for coming. Also, a big thank you to Dubai Future Academy for holding this Ramadan Pioneer Series. And I'm looking forward to shedding some light on the file that I'm responsible on, the future food security. And I know for a lot of you, football is on today, the Champions League.
Yes.
Real Madrid and Liverpool, so I'll try and get... So I'm going to try and get the bulk of the presentation going before the game starts becoming too interesting. So yes, again, thanks again, Said, for having me here. And I'll start now with the presentation. So I'll take the clicker. Now, future shaping the national food security landscape. In a nutshell, it's basically future food security. Our leadership have already taken great strides in the journey of food security. So they've done already a lot of things, but they always tell us we need to keep an eye on the future. We need to be ready and prepared for shocks, for things that come round the corner. So that's why future food security. So me and my team are making sure that the plans ahead are ready so that we can be food secure not only today, but also in future. Let's first understand the term food security. So what is food security? I'll make sure I don't fall into this hole here. Okay, so food security is UAE's population having access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food for an active and healthy life at affordable prices at all times, including emergencies and crises. When you look at having access to food, so number one, you look at availability of food. Food can come either by farms or, so you have the food in the country, locally produced, or they're imported. So that's availability. Accessibility is all of us having accessibility to food, going to the supermarkets, being able to get food from the farm directly. So these are all routes of accessibility. Affordability, affordable prices. So we have to make sure that we have quality food, safe food that is also affordable to everybody. So this in a nutshell is the definition of food security. A lot of people told me, yeah, is it all about being able to produce all your food? No, it's not. It's making sure you have accessibility of good food, healthy food, good quality food to have a healthy life at affordable prices at all situations. Before we look into the future, I'm going to take a step into the past. And if you notice these pictures, I mean, most of the food that we used to eat 40, 50 years ago came from the dates, from the palm trees, from the goats and the camels that used to live with us at home. We had the well where we got the water, we had the sea, or we still have the sea, where we got all of our fish. So if you notice, most of the food that was produced or was available 40, 50 years back was made locally. And most of it was made actually in the Emirati home itself. So if you ask your grandparents, they will all tell you, we were living with the goats and the camels. We had everything with us. And if they didn't have enough food, the animals, they would move somewhere else to make sure that they would have food because that was for them their food security. Now, if we look at where we are today, now this is a global indicator for food security. The UAE is ranked 33rd from 113 countries. If you compare now where we were 40, 50 years ago and where we are now, the biggest difference is that our reliance now on food is on imports. We're nearly at 90% reliance on imports. So with that, I question to you to think about, are we food secure?
No.
We are. You all have accessibility to good food, correct? You all have accessibility. Emergency plans are in place. Inshallah, it never happens, but if there is something that is happening, we are ready for it. We have stock reserves ready for staple foods, etc. But again, we also need to ensure that we have plans ready for future challenges that will come. So from climate change, for example, from global food demand. So the buying power that we have now will be at risk in future if we continue the way we're going. So if you look at this indicator, these are the sub-indicators of it. You look at affordability, this is the buying power. We're ranked, because when you're number one, you're good. When you come down the number, it means you're at more risk. So we can see with the affordability, we're very well ranked. With the quality and safety and accessibility and availability, we still have work to do. And as you know, what is our aim? 33rd. We're not satisfied with 33. Inshallah, among the top 10 by 2021 and number 1 by 2071. So that's where we want to go. That's the target we want to go to in this file. So now let's look at global challenges. So I've already skipped. Now, I'm trying to look now on a broader scale before we start looking at the UAE itself. Predictions are as follows: 50% global food demand increase by 2030. Of course, this is due to global population growing. We always hear the 9 billion population, who's going to feed it. So they expect a global food demand increase by 2030 of 50%. I mean, that is huge when you think of where we are today, how we're struggling to produce food, and we need another 50% increase by 2030, which is basically around the corner. Expected agricultural growth, 1.7% per year. Now, why is it so small? Because the traditional agriculture is struggling. It's much harder now to grow crops outside. You need to use more pesticides. It's becoming more expensive. Water is becoming more scarce. So there's a lot of hindrances, and that's why the expected agricultural growth is so small. Also, the expectancy is 70% of global population will live in cities by 2050. This is also another reason why there's going to be huge challenges of ensuring enough food for the people on Earth. Now, these are also some shocking numbers. When I started taking this file and looking at these numbers, 1/3 of food produced is wasted. So if you think of the whole world and what food we're producing, 1/3 of it goes to waste. That's huge. And 1 in every 3 people suffers from some sort of malnutrition, whether it's hunger or obesity. So we've got both extremes. Just want to give you something, and this is something that I always think about. An apple. If you throw away an apple, what else are you throwing away when you throw that apple? 70 liters of water. I mean, that's like, when you think about it, one apple, it took 70 liters of water to grow that apple and to bring that apple to you. So this is something to think about, especially we're living in a country that we have quite a high percentage of food waste as well. But food waste is also a global issue, but it all comes down to us at the end of the day. Food security, by the way, it's not just a government issue. It's every one of us. You, me, my kid, everyone has a role to play in this file because it's all about your eating habits. And if you think about it, we actually think of food at least 2 to 3 times a day. We make a choice on it, how much we eat, when we eat, what we eat. It's on our mind all the time. Whenever we want to sit with our loved ones, it's usually with food. So food is an emotional, social thing as well. Now let's see how these challenges are propagated here in the UAE. These are just some highlights, but there are of course more challenges than this. So we are now at a population of, the exact number is 9.14, is the population we are at now. Expected population could reach 11 million by 2025. Now, what we must not forget is the tourism. Now we have 18.5 million tourists coming to the UAE every year, 18.5 million. By 2025, they expect 35 million tourists. So all the infrastructure you're seeing, Expo, what's coming up, it's all going to attract more tourists. That means by 2025, we need to feed 20 million more people. Okay? Keep that number in your head. Arable land, 5%, very tiny percent of arable land we have. If you would compare that, for example, to India, that has like 65, 70%, Brazil, 35%. So we have a tiny percentage of arable land. Water, big statement, water. Now, the Ministry of Energy and Industry launched beginning of this year the Water Security Strategy 2036. And that is to make sure that this doesn't happen. Because at the rate that we are using fresh water, it will be depleted by 2030. So the strategy was developed last year and it was announced, and now the programs are being put on turbo to make sure that we are water secure at least by 2036 and beyond. Imported food, as I said, 90%. It's a huge, huge number. And it's something we need to take care of because, okay, I'll give you an example of food. They told me that the average distance that our food, so us living here in the UAE, travels before it gets to us on our plate is 2,400 kilometers. 2,400 kilometers. Now, just think of going that distance, what needs to be done to that food to make sure when it reaches you, it still looks fresh, it still tastes crispy, it's still okay for a few days in your fridge or on your kitchen table. So this is, when you look at the distances the food's traveling, you have to also imagine that all the preservatives that are put into the food, that there are probably also a lot of things in there which are not so good for us. Then you're looking at agricultural production, what it actually contributes to our GDP. Tiny, 0.6%, that's nothing. So this is also a number we need to work at. Now, what are the things we need to do to make sure that we overcome this? Technology. We are now sitting in something which I would say, it's like we were just talking about, like a space shuttle. Yeah. Technology has enabled this building that you're sitting in to be built in 17 days. 17 days. That's crazy when you think about it. So in 17 days, they were able to build this. Why? Technology. And it's the same thing. The future food security sector can only achieve and overcome these challenges with technology and R&D. So going now to what are the weaknesses or the weak points in our chain. We have a high reliance on food imports, which all of you know. We're reaching nearly the 90% mark, which means, and if you look at the past years, it's always been going up. Okay, we need to ensure that this starts going down. Number two, slow adoption of viable and emerging technology. We often see technologies happening outside, but we're a little bit on the slower side in actually taking these technologies and making them commercially viable in the UAE. I would say in the last 2-3 years, we're starting to drive this. I mean, the session today is a good example, trying to get the knowledge hub going, trying to get people to realize what there actually is and actually say, bring it here and let's try it here. So one of the things as well that's really, when you're looking at food, is urban farming. Have you heard of urban farming before? So closed system farming. That means you can now grow your food in a warehouse, in a container, in a small cupboard, in a fridge. When you think of, you can actually grow your food in this and it tastes good. This is the biggest thing. It tastes good too, and the price now is competitive. This is now the right time to bring urban farming to the UAE. We must start this new mindset of getting the youth to come and drive this urban farming sector. Another very promising sector is aquaculture, which in a way is also a closed farming system. It's farming fish in a sustainable way, in an environment where you can say, I can control the water, I can control the feed, I can control the oxygen, and I can produce protein, good protein. So all these emerging technologies are happening now as we speak. There are pilot projects happening. In Al Quoz, there's already a closed system farming. In Ras Al Khaimah, they're already doing a high-tech closed system farming. So things are happening now. But now they need to make sure they find their way into the market. This is also a challenge, but we're going to hopefully put some programs through the accelerators to try and get this industry going. Limited food production R&D capabilities. Now, when I say limited food production R&D capabilities, it's more of a, everyone seems to be working on their own. So there's a lot of universities, they have equipment, they have the professors, the students, but everyone's working in like their own silos. What we need to do, and this is our responsibility, is to make sure we build that network. We need to try and push the R&D or give it an umbrella and say what's important for us is, for example, genomics or seed enhancement. How can we in future go to Mars and put in the palm tree and make it fruit dates? How can we grow things using sun, salt water, and sand? 3 S's that we have here. So R&D is extremely important, and we need to utilize what we have here in the country, because there are people here, but we just need to find that link together. Rapidly evolving citizen and consumer behaviors. I mean, you've all heard, we're over 200 nationalities. Just look around the room. We've got a good diversification here. And everyone has their own tastes. Everyone has their own culture. And the UAE is an open door for bringing in all these cultures and offering all the food. So we have that aspect as well, to make sure not only do we have sufficient and healthy food, but we need to provide for a big spectrum of cultures and people. Also, our consumer behavior. We need to go into schools. We need to change the way school canteens give food to the kids. We need to get kids to understand what's food about. Alhamdulillah, I mean, the generation that I see here, the ones that grew up here in the UAE, we grew up having everything here. And when you're in a situation where you say, okay, well, now I have to take care of what I'm buying and what I'm eating, it's a whole new ball game. And actually teaching our kids that food is not just always readily available on your plate, that you actually have to understand where it came from. It traveled so long to get to you. Maybe then they'll look at food a little bit differently. But easier said than done. I know that as well. High exposure to food shocks and crises. Unfortunately, our neighborhood, our neighbors, some of them are in very unstable situations. And because we're importing so much, we're very at risk that the foods that come into the country could be exposed to shocks. So we need to build that resilience and make sure that we optimize everything in our whole food supply chain. So, what's the solution? It's essential to have a detailed strategy for food security to protect us from likely supply shocks and meet the anticipated increase in demand. Alhamdulillah, our wise leadership has recognized that food security is a national priority. I was appointed Minister of State for Future Food Security on October 19th, and there were 3 things they told me. You need to do a national plan, you need to drive technology in your plan, and you need to do R&D. Those are the 3 things that His Highness Sheikh Mohammed Allah Yahfadhah told me, this is what you need to do in this file. So our team are now working on a whole of country, whole of government strategy. We don't believe that such a strategy can be done on our own, so we brought in at least one representative of each emirate is with us on the team, and also representatives of key federal entities. So we have Ministry of Climate Change and Environment, we have Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health. They're all with us. There's about 16 of us on the team, and we're developing together this whole of government strategy. Inshallah, by end of September, it will be ready, announced with targets, programs, initiatives on what every authority, local authority, federal government has to do on this file, because this file actually cross-cuts so many, it starts from the individual to schools, academia, research institutes, federal entities, etc. And then of course our international relations as well. So the areas are as follows. I call the first one agribusiness. So This is all about the international trade. We need to make sure that we build alliances with certain countries for certain foods. So if you think about food security, you're like, okay, what are our strategic foods? We have to first understand what are we consuming here in the UAE? What are our strategic foods? What are our important foods? What are our unimportant foods? Some things maybe, let's say, asparagus. If asparagus is not in the supermarket, it's not really going to bother us too much, I don't think. I don't know how many of you are. But if something like tomatoes is not available, lettuce is not available, that's an important food, but not a strategic food. Why? Because lettuce, tomato, they don't have much calories. It's not like your rice, wheat that have or quinoa, for example, that have nutrition and have the calories, etc. But the buzz that would happen in the media would be crazy. There's no lettuce, there's no tomato. So that's why we need to differentiate between strategic foods, this is the foods for survival, important foods, which we're used to having all the time, and then the other categories that will come. Emergency and crisis management. What happens if, for example, a country that we're importing a staple or a strategic food from decides, not because they have an issue with us or a political issue, they in their country have an issue. They had droughts for 2 years. They don't have enough food to feed their own people. So they said, "Khalas, we're not exporting any food. These foods are staying in the country." And things like this happened in the past. So what plans do we then have in place to make sure that everyone still feels safe and we're still food secure? So this is a big subject in itself, which we're also working together with the National Emergency and Crisis Management to put in plans. I call it like wargaming. You put scenario. Okay, then this plan happens. And what if this happens? Okay, then we have to do this plan. So there's a lot of innovation in this, and we need to use what we have now. I mean, alhamdulillah, the UAE is has excellent logistics facilities. I mean, all the airlines, all the planes that come, from the sea transportation systems, it's amazing. So in a way, you can also use this excellent hub of what's been already built for these crisis management. But we need to always think of, it's the expression of thinking out of the box and thinking how we can ensure that people stay calm in these situations and how the food gets just distributed to the people as well. I mean, it's a whole subject in itself. Optimized food production systems. This is where things like urban farming, I was talking about, aquaculture. By the way, this is I call it ag tech as well, so it's very technology driven. And inshallah, in my next session, I'll be in the edge section, I'll be talking a little bit more about that. But definitely urban farming, so vegetables, herbs, fish, these are the things that I see that have great potential in the UAE. Align R&D capabilities and expedite technology and innovation. As I said before, we need to join efforts as there is stuff happening already, but we need to have an umbrella and basically a research agenda. And of course, in line with the advanced science strategy that's just been announced recently. Cultural awareness and behavior interventions, also a big subject in itself. This involves all of us, our behavior towards food, how we consume food, how we get rid of food, how our kids are being grown up, what are they exposed to at school. And then as well, you know, I'd love to see in future that homes have their own little food systems. So maybe go back to the roots of, we used to grow stuff at home, so we should bring that back, but now in a more modern way, in a fun way, that the kids think it's cool to make food. Then public health and nutritional dimension. You might ask, what's that about? Basically, you're saying we need a health standard in the UAE. We need to define what is a healthy person in the UAE with our culture, with our background, with our DNA. We need to understand what's the calorie, what's the average calorie, salt, sugar, etc. that we should be consuming. We're living here, it's a different environment to the US or Europe or Asia. So we have to have our own health standard. And if you can imagine, this health standard is basically going to also expose what are the additives, examples that could harm us. I mean, go into any restaurants, there could be a lot of things in the foods which we're taking into our bodies, which is affecting our health. But if there's a health standard, then at least we know that the harmful things are not there. At least we know that when our kids, the teenagers, are going out on the beach road, having their paratha and karak and the foods that they usually have, that we know that it's free from all these chemicals. Okay, so, but this will take time because you need to get the private sector to look for alternatives. So this is just an inspirational slide. Okay, so if you look at this, for example, I love this picture because I always think of what we can do with the 3 S's: sun, seawater, and sand. This is a picture of using solar energy. They're producing protein and vegetables with seawater. Okay, it's a conceptual idea. Aquaculture, so fish farming in closed systems. Why closed system important here? Because water is such an important resource for us. So these recirculating systems basically take in the water one time and then keep recirculating it. Vertical farming. I'm sure a lot of you have seen these conceptual plans from Singapore of these amazing green-looking buildings that actually also grow vegetables and fruits in them. Alternative proteins. I'm sure you've heard of lab meat. So I was in the Milken Institute Global Conference just about 3 weeks ago. The whole conference was vegan. So they were very much about, we don't need animals anymore. We can feed just from plant-derived products. So lab meat is basically taking cells from animals and growing them in a lab. And you'll be so surprised, I was too because I tried some of these. You eat chicken, it looks like chicken, it tastes like chicken, even when you cut it, it's like chicken, but it's actually plants. So technology has now advanced so much that they're able to make everything that we love to eat out of plants. Okay, then this is an example of a food system for home use. Okay, so if you can imagine something like that, you know what you're eating at home. So I'll say, okay, I have some peppers and cucumbers, lettuce, I have my peppermint tea that I have every evening. So I have certain things. Okay, I grow them. If I go on holiday, I can slow down the growth, give the plant less water, give the plant less light. It will grow more slowly. And you can control everything now just through your phone. And farming now is becoming more, it's not about farming anymore, it's actually more IT based. So everything is now Internet of Things. This is another conceptual idea of growing greens and then having the fish ponds here. So the water, this is aquaponics. So the water from here actually goes in and gives the plants what they need. And that water is full of nutrients. And then the people are waiting for their food. So this is like the future cafe. This slide is basically an inspiration for my next talk, when I start going more deeply into ag tech and aquaculture, for example. And I'll be talking a little bit more about these alternative proteins. Insects, also alternative proteins. But it is happening, it is happening. I mean, for example, you could say, okay, maybe now not for human consumption, but maybe use proteins for pets. At the end of the day, it is, I mean, pets do eat flies and insects. So these are some of the things you could look at as well. So, yes, without further ado, I don't know how I am in the time. Does football start yet or not? So this is just a brief of what it is, what food security is, what we're working on. The main target now is the strategy, that we have a plan, we know where we're going. And this, as I said, this strategy is going to be exciting. I mean, for me, it's a subject very dear to my heart. Nutrition, food, and making sure that we all have food and we all have a good life and we're all happy. We want to become the happiest community. So thank you very much.